recording. So we're going to do name, pronoun, hide the transcript because that drives me nuts. Name, pronoun, where we're from, bus or walk. So I'm Dr. J, use they as a pronoun. I'm from DFT, acting as service designer on this lovely thing called NaPTAN that we all work on. Would I rather bus or walk? I've actually discovered that I don't mind walking, even though I walk with a stick. And I'm not the world's greatest walker. If I give myself that extra 10 minutes, that 20-minute trip into town is a bit nicer when I walk it across Waterloo Bridge, as long as it's not raining and too cold. So the next person I'm going to give this question to is Tom Mugridge. You're the next one up.
Hello, I'm Tom Mugridge. I'm from Nottinghamshire County Council, working in transport and facilities. Stand-in for Trisha Wright today, actually, who's on holiday. As for bus or walking, I'd take walking.
And what's your pronoun? What do you use?
He,
She, or they,
him.
Tom? He, him. Fantastic.
Yep.
Next one up, thank you so much, will be Tim Rivet.
Hi, I'm Tim Rivet. He, him. For today, I guess I'm probably subject matter expert for the DFT, and I would prefer to walk.
Thank you so much. The next person up is Thomas Carter.
Tom Carter, pronoun he, him, from South Yorkshire MCA, and I'd say I probably prefer to walk.
Fantastic. We're a whole group of walkers who just are avoiding that bus. The next person up is Tansy.
Hi, I'm Tansy Appleby. I use she, her pronouns. I work for Transport for Wales, and I would also prefer to walk, unless I'm in high heels, in which case I might get the bus.
Good choices, good choices. Thank you so much. The next person up is Morgan Evans. According to my list, I have no idea how my list is organised, so I'm sorry about that, Morgan.
I'm Morgan Evans, he, him. I'm a data analyst from Eto World, and I'm from Wales, and I think I'd rather walk.
Excellent. We are very much the world of walkers. The next person up would be Mark Tyra, who's just arrived. We're just doing the icebreaker here, Mark.
I'll go on. I was just going to say I've missed out what we're being asked.
Oh, yes. I was just going to quickly run through it. So it's your name, your pronoun, where you're from, and bus or walk. Really simple question today.
Mark Tyra from Transport for Greater Manchester, he, him. And yeah, a bus if it's more than a short walk.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. The next person up is Lisa Wadley.
Hi, I'm Lisa Wadley, and I'm from Eto World. Pronouns are she, her, and I'd prefer to walk.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. The next person up would be Keith Willis, who is driving, so he may not be able to respond. I'll give you 2, 1. Okay, Keith, don't worry about it. We'll go to Mark Hodge. We'll go to Mark. I'm not going to attempt people's Mark.
Mark Hodgkiss, scheduled bus service officer with Cumbria County Council. He, him, and yeah, I'm a walker as well.
Fantastic, thank you. The next person up would be Haraj.
Thank you, Jay. So yeah, my name is Haraj Maan. I'm pronoun is he, him. Where from? DFT, product owner on NaPTAN. Bus or walk? Walk, just because of the fresh air, but obviously if it's really far, we'll take a bus.
Fantastic, thank you. And the next person up is Hannah.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Abdallah. I use she, her for pronoun, and I'm also from DFT. I'm one of the other product owners on NaPTAN, and I prefer to walk.
Fantastic. And I think the next person up is Robin Greenslade.
Hello there, my name is Robin Greenslade in Rhondda and Taff Council, South Wales, and I'm a walker.
And which pronoun do you use, Robin?
Oh, sorry, is he or him?
Fantastic, thank you so much. The next one up would be Gillian.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, Gillian Watson, she, her, from Fife Council up in Scotland, and I'll probably take the bus. because I'm usually running at last minute.
So you think the bus will be faster? You don't know London traffic.
Oh well, it's probably raining up here. That's why I take the bus.
Good one, good one. The next one up is Jared Butler, who's just arrived. So I will quickly explain to them. We're just doing the icebreaker. So it's name, pronoun, where you're from, and do you want to bus or walk? And Gerard, 2, 1. Okay, we'll jump up to Ewan McKay. Hopefully I've said that close.
It's Owen. Hiya.
Owen.
Yeah, so I'm Owen. It's him. I'm from Transport for Greater Manchester, and I would prefer to walk.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. The next one up is Ian Barrett.
Ian Barrett, he, him, Lancashire County Council, walk.
Fantastic. And we'll run through the last couple of people so nobody is left out. Andy Hunt.
Andy Hunt, he, him. I'm from Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority, and I like walking.
Fantastic. And then it's Andy Hole.
Hi, I'm Andy Hole. I'm a he, him, from National PTI, and I'd walk unless it's raining when I take the bus.
Good choice. The next one up is Andrew.
Yeah, sorry. Hello, everyone. Andrew Sharma-Freshcover from DFT. Pronouns are he, him. And I'd rather take the bus because they always seem to get lost when I'm walking.
And the last person up is Jenny.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jenny Amos. She works well for me. I'm a lead user experience designer leading on BOD, the Bus Open Data Service for DFT.
Fantastic.
And I would, I would
sorry.
probably take the bus. It's okay. I'd probably take the bus because I've moved to the countryside and there aren't many of them, so it's a novelty again.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for that. Now, the plan for today, we're going to run through where we are, and I've got a little bit of talking through what we think NaPTAN is that I'd love your feedback on, because it's how we're trying to talk about NaPTAN to a little bit of a wider group. And it'd be really good to get your views on it. So we're going to run through what is NaPTAN enabling and what is a bus stop. Going to do a very quick run through previously on just some of the stuff that we've all done previously. And then I'm going to go through what I've called the managed removal of stops. And there's an entire discussion that goes on there as to why it's not called archived and deleted. But I'd like to go through and review who needs what. Have I got the right questions in there? Do we have answers to any of those questions, and how we're planning on doing it? That should take us about the rest of these 2 hours, or the next hour and 45 minutes. We might take a little 5-minute break in the middle if we need. Any questions before I barrel on through? I'm afraid it's going to be a lot of me showing you stuff and talking a little bit today. I promise the next one will be much more interactive. Fantastic. So we talk about NaPTAN often as the best data set you've never heard of, because most, unless you're us, and we are literally the people who care about it, nobody else seems to even know it exists, even though they use it every day. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to kind of make this just a tiny bit more concrete for people, because when we're talking about NaPTAN to people outside of this group, they don't quite get what we do. Yes, Mark, we have, and I will be running through the outcome of that super fast. So just to run through what I'm trying to describe to people. So this is Beryl. Beryl lives in Bristol. You may note that I love alliteration. Beryl wants to see her friend Beverly. Beverly lives in Birmingham. So the journey that we're going to facilitate is Beryl, who lives in Bristol, figuring out how she gets to her friend Beryl, who lives in Birmingham, via all of these. She has a number of options of what she can take. We believe there might also be a ferry if she goes via Liverpool, which would be a bit of a mad one. But it's, how does NaPTAN help facilitate this? What does NaPTAN do in this journey, and how can we describe it to people? Does that kind of way of talking, I know it sounds a little bit Dr. Susie, but it's a way of getting people to kind of see the concrete benefit of what NaPTAN does. It stops it from being just an abstract thing and turns it into something quite concrete. So what I've tried to, and Beryl uses a travel planner. That was the next bit down. So what I've tried to do here is try to think about how the flow of data is enabled by NaPTAN and where it touches. Now, I haven't put any arrows on here at the moment. And what I want to do is just get your feedback as to whether I've got all the different data points, whether I've called some of the pieces out correctly, and if there's anything that I'm completely missing, you will hopefully be able to put it in. So, local authorities put in a bus stop, and to put in a bus stop, there is a proposal phase, a planning phase, and I've called it a provide phase or a provision phase, where you put the pole in the ground or mark out the road or do the traffic adjustment. That data then comes in for the local authorities from each local authority and is built into the national data set. That national data set then goes off to bus operators who do organise their routes, do the planning of their services and the planning of their staff to manage those services. They then provide that data, pardon me, through to BODS and TransExchange to allow those routes and those services to be published. They also use that same data for their on-the-bus systems, which says what the next stop is, that runs their ticketing and also manages their fare zones. Also on the bus is the real-time bus information, which manages how they're hitting the schedule, what incidents are happening if the bus is rerouted around something, and also where is the bus now. And the outcome of this is some punctuality reporting, which seems to go back up into BODS. There is also something quite similar for coach operators where they do the routes, the planning and the staff. And I think it's CNDS, although I might have the N and the D around the wrong way, for the coach national data service. And then there's possibly some real-time coach information, which the coach operators will also use for their schedules, the incidents, and where is the coach. All of this information is pulled together along with the rail, the travel line, the silver line, and RTI information. All of that pieces of data are then fed through into the consumer apps, which can be run by the bus company, the local authority, Google, Apple, or Travel Line, and there's many, many more in there. I've just tried to think of a few. And then this enables Beryl to catch the right bus from the right place at the right time for the right fare. And NaPTAN is kind of the biggest enabler, or one of the enablers across all of this. So that's a little bit of the way that we're starting to talk about NaPTAN off to some of not just our stakeholders, but other people around DFT and around this who aren't as embedded in public transport as we are. So I would like to give you, just having run through that super fast, I'd like to give you about 3-5 minutes just to put any of your feedback on there. Does this work? Does this make sense? Have I missed stuff? I'm sure I've missed entire pieces of this puzzle. So I'm going to put the timer on for 5 minutes and I'm going to sit here very quietly and just give you that time.
5 minutes later.
So hopefully you all heard that lovely bing bong from an airplane. So what I'm going to do is I will zoom in and read through the stickies that you've all added, and thank you so much for putting your thoughts in, and then I'll ask any questions to kind of clarify them and make sense if there's any that I can't quite understand. So let's just have a look. Does this okay? Right. New bus stops may be proposed, requested by bus operators. Perfect. Even so, just to be clear that I'm understanding this one, new bus stops, that proposal point could come in from a bus operator saying, I think we need a bus stop here because that's what people are telling me. So that goes there. Asset management, I've kind of tried to summarize that under provide, but I think that's a really good point that I need to highlight a little bit there. And assisted digital printed materials. Is this like the stuff that's at the bus stop that tells you which buses come here and their timetables? Is that the bit that you're talking about with this one?
Yes. I don't know if there's any other ways to gain. I know you talk about route planners, but yeah, any other assistance if it was offline, but I assume you want to keep digital.
No, offline is also important because I know, for example, during lockdowns 1 to 7 or 1 to however many you had in your location, there was a lot of changing of bus timetables, and I know during one of the discussions that we had there was this created a lot of problems for people in printing out the sheets for at bus stops. And keeping that information up to date. So I'm aware that it's physical as well as digital, and that's one of the interesting things about NaPTAN, because it's talking about something on the street, but it's digital, but it also needs to feed back to be on the street. Would this also include the flaggy things that tell me which number buses come past? I don't know what they're technically called on the little pole things. I know you have those things of these are the bus routes that you can catch from this stop. Do most of you have that, or do you just have the name there? Okay, so Jenny, do you know?
I meant the printed materials, and also if there was any other timetables, but the printed materials on the bus stop. Yeah.
So there's timetables. What are those things called? Can somebody help me? Are they called flags?
Departure board
excellent. I'm seeing.
Yeah,
we call them
excellent.
flags. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so we need to include flags in the way that I described provide, which is provisioning something. That will need to include flags, and you don't know what's going to go through the bus stop until you've gone and had people do the planning. So that makes an interesting little loop that has to happen before you can provision a bus stop. Good to know. Next one is flexible services, DRT. So demand responsive transport, demand responsive. Brilliant. Those are difficult ones because don't quite know how to do them at the moment. I know, Tim, you and I have thoughts, but those are difficult ones to do, and I think that might be worthy of an interesting little call to cover off how we do those demand-driven transports, because I know there's a lot of boroughs or a lot of local authorities who are doing them, and we might be putting them into NaPTAN slightly differently, so let's at least align a little bit on how we put them in. Is everyone doing DRTs, or is it only on trial in a few places? And this is where Tansy and Andy are probably, between them, they look after about 50% of the NaPTAN estate. Andy.
Yeah, we've had lots of DRT in lots of our areas come and go. Mostly they think is a brilliant idea because the scheduled bus service is costing too much. We'll get DRT. Then they bring in DRT, get rid of the scheduled services, and that costs way more than the scheduled service. So they cancel the DRT and bring back scheduled services. And it's just a cycle that goes Bristol, Wecker area are about to scrap most of their scheduled services and bring in DRT to cover mass areas. 850 stops, I think it is, are about to become DRT all the way around Bristol. They bought 30 buses. I've told them they'll need at least 1,000, but they won't listen to me. It will last a couple of weeks, and then the councillors will say, no, you have to bring back the services. So, yeah.
And I see that they're also in Suffolk. So this might be one, if you'd like to be involved in a DRT discussion, I think that might very well be one of the things that we need to bring in, because I know Tim and I and Bods are all being asked how we do this, and I think that's a really interesting little discussion to have about how we put it in different places, and also share our knowledge of how successful it's been or not, because it does seem to be the thing du jour. I did note that the rail data, I'm kind of leaving rail data slightly alone at the moment because I know there's the rail open data set. It's not called RODS, it's called something else, but there's a big rail data service, and one of the things that we need to do over the next week or next couple of weeks is look at how NaPTAN and that can interlink and feed into each other, so and to make rail journeys that involve buses a little bit smoother. Consultants, planning authorities. So is this people who are involved at this early stage at building out the proposals and planning, or are they using the NaPTAN data for planning?
So planning housing estates and new business developments, that sort of thing. So it's not always the authorities. Sometimes it's consultants for building companies and things.
Excellent. But they will, however, eventually need to go to the authority to get the road or the pole put in or the town planning part. Yeah. Just so I'll add an extra bit to proposal that says it could be proposed by bus operators or planning or consultants who are building a housing estate. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Perfect. Excellent. Right. Running down. This is the data flow from the DFT point of view. Yes, it is. Can you help me if there's more things around, or if there's other points of view that we should run from? And because I'm trying to describe this to people to try to describe how this works. If I described it from a bus operator's point of view, what would be slightly different here?
Yeah, I put that note on, Dr. J. Our system does almost everything there. We've got the planning systems in our data. We're owned by the local authorities and bus operators of the Southwest mostly, but also some other areas have joined us later. And the software we've got exports to NaPTAN, exports to BODS, exports to the real-time system. We also have a real-time system built in. We got a fares module. We got disruptions. We do everything and then export little bits to little places. So we got the journey planners. We've got mass apps. We've got asset management systems. It's operational statistics modules. It's all. We don't need to go. We class our data as the master data. We export to NaPTAN. We don't then import back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. So that's an interesting one. So if Andy's at one end where his software does it all, are there people who are at the other end who maybe have bits of software and pieces, or maybe pieces of paper, and maybe we could build a little software scale and get people to indicate where they are in terms of, I've got the thing that does everything and I just need to pass the stuff off to DFT, or I need to get stuff from DFT to be able to do my thing, and we can kind of map that out. Would that be a really interesting thing to do? Give me a thumbs up, a nod, a smile, a grin, something like that. It would help me, but I want to ensure that it would also help yous. And it might also help BODS kind of understand some of the landscape of some of the people who we share as well. Maybe. Okay, we'll try that. Thank you. I've fixed my bad spelling and my bad typo. It is the National Coach data set. I knew there was something with those letters, and I did my best to get it in there. I fixed that. There's printed information which needs to be up the top here. And that seems to be all that we missed. So in terms of trying to describe it, I think there's bits and pieces that we can talk through, and we can talk about the difference in software and how that looks, so that it's not just about, not just quite so from the DFT point of view, but in terms of trying to describe to somebody what NaPTAN enables. Have I hit did I find all the places where NaPTAN is used in the bus systems at least, and maybe coaches? Was there anything that I missed? Possibly not. I'll give you a few seconds while I scroll, because this is a huge thing. So very quickly, just to touch on what is a bus stop. Now, this was the outcome of almost 2 years of us talking. And Mark, yes, we have been here many, many times before. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page for what is a bus stop. So one of the first things that we came to, and this took us about 3 meetings, I believe, the definition of a bus stop is where the bus stops. I know it sounds so simple and almost reductive, but it was beautifully describing what a bus stop was in a way that describes all of the different types of bus stops. Because if you started to describe with a poll, it meant your custom stops, your hail and ride, and some of your others, especially your flex stops, weren't included. So we just came up with this definition. For most stops, and I'm going to say your custom stops and your staticky stops, are measured as a 1 metre by 1 metre square, centred on where the passenger needs to stand to catch the bus, to get on the bus. And the where is represented in eastings, northings, and is translated to lat long using the Ordnance Survey standards and tools, and I spelled it all out there. Is there anything in that is controversial? Anything in that brings up a red flag for anyone, and you go, no, this doesn't quite fit my world? Yes. I recognise that this doesn't include hail and rides, and that's another one that we need to kind of sort out with the flexibles and a couple of the others. Just that's one of those big ones that we need to sit down and talk a little bit more about. Yeah. Oh, that's good to know. Journey planners don't make use of it. So hail and rides are presented as a single stop, even if they're a whole section of road.
Wrong.
That's wrong? Who's wrong?
Yeah. Sorry, it's Andy. Our journey planner uses hail and ride sections. You can get on any part of the hail and ride and get off at any part. Same as the flexible zone. You can journey plan from any part of the flexible zone to wherever the bus is going. So, Andy, you have one funky thing with your thing. The person who wrote the sticky on the board, can you help me understand your point of view that might be slightly different from Andy's point of view?
Yeah, just any journey planner I've come across to use has told me to walk up to that single point of where the hail and ride NaPTAN is, not just at any point along that road. I'm just interested in what journey planner is your journey planning system.
It's the Ment's Ether system.
Okay, I'll check that one out. But yeah, I think when I use things like Google or Travelline and stuff, it's always just told me to walk to the single central NaPTAN point and not made use of the start and end coordinates. So then
depends what you travel
intelligently predict along that road.
Yeah. It depends what you journey plan from. If you journey plan from a locality, it will go from the centre point of the locality. If you journey plan from a hail and ride section, it will go from that.
Andy's right. It's probably more to do with the start point of the journey, not where the actual hail and ride section is. And the locality or where you're searching from makes a huge difference to the walk leg of the journey plan. We spent years creating a custom gazetteer for the Travel and Camry website because we had that problem with localities. We found generally for journey planning, localities aren't very helpful because they'll put you at the centre point of a village, which is not necessarily the place you want to start from. As an example.
Interesting. So gazetteer is one of the things that's on the longest, I won't say the long list because it's not that big, but it does have MPTG and gazetteer stuck there as to how we use locality. So this is a really good topic to bring up again there and really have a conversation. And Mark and Andy, hopefully you can, and Tansy, you'll all come along and we can tear down into because we did touch on it a little bit last time as to which high street is it. But I think there's a lot more about localities and gazetteers that we can dig into and try and understand and make sure that we've got something that really works and is layered up correctly. Right. Anything else on what is a bus stop? We now know a bus stop is not just a stop. It can also be a hail and ride, and they have a length and a width that we also need to kind of figure out. Right. Previously on NaPTAN, I'm just going to run through this super fast because I'm sure you've all heard it before. Coaches. We uncovered that a coach carries multiple passengers for the road and the driver is responsible for loading and unloading the passenger's luggage. They are different mechanically and legally. They are a different, I missed a word out, mechanical and legal vehicle from a bus. A coach cannot have a baby in a pram on board, for example. There is a distance limit on bus routes of 50 kilometres, which is an EU limit because it's in kilometres. Coaches use TACO for driving hours. Buses use drivers' running time tables. Really good to know because that says a lot about schedules. Here was an important point that we'll get to a little bit later. Coach references and the 900 national coach stops, so that was ATCO code 900 coach stops, are no longer required, and this data has been withdrawn from NaPTAN. We still have it stored, just in case anyone suddenly goes, but I need it. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how managed removal can happen using some of these as examples. And then we had precisely and accurately, which we kind of just covered. We confirmed that all LAs are delivering eastings and northings to the correct precision, a metre by a metre. We concluded the best point to measure a bus stop was where somebody needs to stand to catch a bus, with the focus on the passenger's experience. We know where Beverly needs to stand. We at DFT took the questions about centrally performing the eastings, northings conversions to lat long. There is some stuff that's happened. We don't yet have a proper answer, so we will come back with that. Meanwhile, the Ordnance Survey have a page on how to do this. One of the things that we may have uncovered is some of the softwares are using something slightly different to this, and we want to sit down and work with people and ensure that we've got a really good way of getting through converting these if we need to convert them. And we suggest that we should only use the Ordnance Survey because then we don't end up with things that are atomic level precision but slightly wrong, like 300 metres down the road. We did some work on street versus schema and we didn't reach a conclusion on any way forward, so there will be much more discussion on street versus schema. This includes the flex, some of the uses of hail and ride, including marked hail and ride sections, which we know exist but don't exist according to the schema. So we want to look at how we can make these tweaks and propose them and put them out and ensure that the people who are consuming the data understand the changes, because that also seems to be a little bit of a problem. We had a bit of a roadmap. The lat long, adding in latitude, longitude where it was missing was the most popular request. We're still looking at how that happens. And the other thing that came through was the archive service. So I'm going to take a deep breath, grab some water, and we are going to tackle what is now called managed removal. Now, why is it called managed removal? Because we already have the words archived and deleted all throughout the schema, and there are several versions of what is archived. There is a version of what is deleted, and just to avoid any duplication of language, I created something called managed removal of stops. Now, when you see stuff in this kind of hand-drawn font, it will be a draft. When we get through all the consultations on this, I'll change it to be slightly more standard lettering so that it looks a bit more less like a comic. But I thought, while I'm doing draft stuff, it should look quite drafty. So the goal of the managed removal is to ensure that NaPTAN data is validated, up to date and accurate. The local authority goal, and this is what I believe, is that local authorities want to keep NaPTAN data updated to reflect the street for passengers. So that is what I think is the goal of what you are trying to do, and managed removal will help you with this. Feel free to leap in if you think I'm wrong. So in scope, of what I've looked at is permanently removing stops from the published NaPTAN dataset in a controlled manner. What is out of scope at this time is a very long list. Permanently removing an MPG record, permanently removing a stop area, permanently removing a field from NaPTAN, changing the status modification options in NaPTAN and MPTG, addressing street versus schema representation of stops, and addressing the invalid data for status modification in NaPTAN. So I've put all of that out of scope, although I get a sense there's a couple of those that we may need to address or even touch on and bring slightly into scope. I then did a dictionary, which I'm not going to read through, and it's just letting people who are new to NaPTAN kind of understand how I've used some language and what is archived and what is deleted, and how it's used. So, coming to the top, I've called it a sidebar because it was the type of stops we want to remove. And there are 3 types of stops that need to be removed in a managed way from the data set. There are the oopsies. These are stops where there has been a typo in the data. Yes, Tansy, I just called them oopsies. There are stops where there's been a typo in the data, which means they should not have been created with the ACTO codes they have. This is possible in some systems which allow free typing of the ACTO code by the local authority, and a mistyped digit can put a stop on the wrong local authority. An example with 3 stops, and I think they were entered as 514 rather than 541, but they could be the other way around. They just ended up slightly in the wrong place due to a typo, and we just wanted to remove them. They would never exist. They were just a data oopsie. So that's one type of data that we want to get rid of. The other type of data that we want to get rid of is it no longer exists. These are stops where the physical infrastructure of the LA means they will never be reinstated as a stop. These stops are just no longer active. They can never be recreated. An example of this is the Manchester bus station that was demolished and rebuilt as a shopping centre. So the stops were put all around the outside of the shopping centre, and where they used to be should be completely removed because they can no longer be reinstated. Unless you want to be like the Blues Brothers and drive through a shopping mall, and that's probably a very niche aging reference for many of us. The last one is when an ACTO code needs to be split, because we need to get rid of, if you split an ACTO code, you're going to have to duplicate or recreate the stops with a new number, and we want to get rid of the old ones. Or one ACTO code ends up with a whole pile of stops that it is just sitting there. These are just no longer active. They can never be created with their current ACTO code. An example would be Christchurch splitting from its parent local authority. So we know that that's one of the things that we need to look at. Is there anything that I've missed here in describing the stops that we might want to remove? Fantastic. So what I'm going to do is run through the users really, really quickly. Now, just be aware I've used various names for people. These are just, yes, thank you, Mark. You are very definitely on my mind when I am planning this. Do not worry. You are one of my key people. What I wanted to do was help the team understand the different types of local authorities and the different ways that you work. So I've broken it into 4 types, and excuse me if I've used people's names. It's just easier because there's so few of us. It's really simple to do. So I've called the first one John, who does it all. John manages the whole of the NaPTAN process for a local authority and is a team of 1. I know that there's some of you who do this. For an example, we've got Ethan at Wiltshire, where we know that Ethan does everything. And I've kind of brought together how many users, how many ACTO codes, and about how many stops are looked after by those ACTO codes. Those numbers, don't really believe them. Me and Andrew have to go through and do a little bit more hunting on this. Then we've got Sindhu and Kim who are pairing on it. So Sindhu and Kim pair on the NaPTAN process for a local authority, and they are in a non-hierarchical structure or team of 2 or 3. In practices, one might be called a manager over the other, but they both pretty much do the same job. And we know, for example, Glasgow is an example of this, where we've spoken to both Iona and Elisa, and they both do very much the same job. It's just who's doing what this week seems to be the next one. Then I've called it Andy the Mega Agent. This is simply because there are two mega agents, Andy and Tansy, and you work in very slightly different ways. So we've made notes of those. Agent comes in two broad types, Andy and Tansy. And this type of user also has a local authority sitting in the background. So what we need to be aware of is, talking with Andy and Tansy, we also need to think of the local authorities that they are working for and just be aware of that. Andy looks after the NaPTAN data processes for many local authorities. They're in a commercial relationship with the LAs. They host the software and provide services. Tansy looks after the NaPTAN process for many authorities. They receive updates and add them to their software and then publish. Tansy has a team. Andy works mostly on their own. And the LA has a relationship with their agent and are not directly within NaPTAN. And we gave an example of Wales because that's the easier one for me to write out in a single post-it than write the list of Andys. One of the things that we did, and you'll notice under all of these different types, there are a pile of questions. What I'm going to do in a minute is just give all of you, once I've gone through the users, give all of you a chance to look at those questions and to see if we can answer them, or if you think of other questions we should ask. And then the last one is Gerard and team. So Gerard manages the NaPTAN process for a large local authority and has a team who do the day-to-day work on NaPTAN, and there is a bit of a hierarchical relationship. An example is TfL. We also know the other example is TFGM. There's probably another couple of them, but that is very much those big local authorities. Then I've broken down, so those are the data producers. Then I've tried to break down the data consumers a little bit as well. So we've got Justin, who has a duopoly on the bus. So Justin manages a team at VIX, who with Ticketer are a duopoly, more or less, of on-the-bus systems that provide RTI and ticketing information. Justin looks after the central feed for many of his clients. Now, I know that there's a number of smaller softwares and other software that's used by smaller bus operators. I've focused on Ticketer and VIX at the moment because they are used on the bigger ones and kind of hitting that 80%. But if you can think of other people that we should talk to in this space, please just put their names down on a sticky here. Then we've broken down the bus operators into two. So we've got Simone, who has a bus, and Neil, who has depots, and just trying to reflect the two different size bus operators that we know, like ourselves and BODs, are working with. So Simone is kind of a 1 or 2 person team. They run a small bus company. They work in a single local authority. They don't really understand what NaPTAN is, and she knows it's needed to make her routing software work. We've got an example from East Sussex. And then Neil, his depots, is very much looking at your kind of Stagecoach, Go Ahead, First Buses, that kind of bigger bus operator who's got multiple buses and depots and things like that to manage. And they have, we believe, slightly different software requirements and slightly different communication requirements when we need to make any changes. So I've asked a couple of questions from them. David runs an API. David manages a software solution that combines NaPTAN data with other travel data for his client. It's Ito World, it's Basemap, it's probably at least one other within the systems. Come and have a chat with us if you think you should belong in this group. And I've got a little thing there that is in the wrong place. Just let me take that off. I'll just unlock it and remove it. Right, Julie manages PlusBus. Julie, who manages PlusBus. We know that PlusBus is not quite working right with NaPTAN data. There's a lot of work that they're having to do with the NaPTAN data. So we want to kind of get in there and ensure that archived and deleted or any managed removal of stops is going to work with them and not break their systems. Keith, you're mentioned here because I needed to figure out how to describe people who build the ecosystem software. So you were the easiest person that I could think of to put in this spot for somebody who builds the ecosystem software. So we've put you in as the exemplar, but this is also referring to all of the ecosystem software like Omnibus, Ments, Trapeze, Diva, and I know I keep on repeating myself because I always forget which way round they go. Then we've got some DFT users. So we've got AWA who manages BODs. So talking about, as somebody who uses BODs data, what do they need to know about archived and deleted stops or managed remove stops? Andrew, who supports users. Andrew Sharma, who's on the call. And sorry, Andrew, I'm not going to attempt your second name, the other half of your surname today. They do a lot of work managing the requests and also checking and looking through the data. And then we've got Ron, who's one of the developers, or Cody NaPTAN. So what are they doing, and what do we need to cover them? So those are all the users, and that's quite a lot to take in. So what I'm going to give you is maybe 5 minutes just to look through those users, think of any that we might have missed who would be using NaPTAN data. And also have a look through the slightly pale green questions underneath. I know a lot of the users have very, very similar questions, but there's some specific ones for each user type. So have a think about which user type is you, and have I asked, are we going to be looking at the right questions? And you may even have the answers for them. So just give you, before we do that, is there any questions on those users? Does this make sense? Trying to break down who's going to be using this. Cool. I will start the timer.
Dr. J, your example of Ethan, by the way, is one of mine.
Oh, sorry. Then
that's all right. That's all right. All of my local authorities are an Ethan, but I manage them. Actually, some are groups like Manchester as well, like Bristol and Wecker. You know, I train them. I manage their data.
That is really good to know. We should get together and kind of map these out a little bit closer. I literally did this very quick mapping and trying to find those single points. I won't say late at night, but I was crunching my way through some data, just trying to figure out how many OneFIS we had, or how many people we had doing one uploads, and that's why I say the numbers don't totally match, because I think I've double counted a few people. I didn't know you did Wiltshire though. I thought you, but then again, I've got probably got a very old list for you, Andy, from like a year or more ago.
There was another one that was a bit wrong. That we're commercial. We're owned by the local authorities. We're not for-profit, owned by the local authorities.
I will tweak that slightly. Let me just put a sticky besides that, because I was trying to describe you, and also trying to describe slightly the difference between you and Tansy. This is more because between the two of you, you literally do look after, I think it's just under half of all of the ACTO codes and slightly more than half of all of the stops in NaPTAN. So you are the peeps.
Five minutes later.
Because one of the difficulties of this, just with this last minute left, is trying to figure out some of the permissioning of who can do it, but also who needs to know if it's done. So if Tansy hands off to one of her team to do the archiving or the managed deletion, should they know about it? If, for example, Mark, Mark's on hold, so he's not going to hear us. I was just going to say, Mark or Gerard, if you have one of your team do something, and do we let you know, and how do we build that hierarchy or that notification hierarchy within the systems? That's a really tough nut to crack, because it's different for every single local. Try and really think about a solution, or it'll be a one size fits no one, which is never a good thing. So we've got a few seconds left. Is there any questions that anyone has? Any burning red flags in how we went through? Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly run through the process as is, because it's a little bit. I've just realised that that's lost itself slightly, and I'll just do this. Just to try to give you an understanding of where we're starting from. Some of this is kind of revealing a little bit, and I'm sure you'll be patient with us. So, the current process for managed removal of stops does not exist. We know that there are stops in the system that you've been wanting to get rid of for a while. We don't have a way of doing it currently. And I've put in a little bit of the historical context. As far as and this is one of the things that I want to understand around the time delay behind removing things, the schema updates and a few things like this. We also believe that the migration back to DFT broke the stored procedure that was doing whatever the archiving used to be. So what we've done is we've got an example XML from 2016 that has some stops that are no longer in the system. So we know something happened, something ran at least one point, but we cannot find evidence of it running reliably for a very, very long time. So we're going to say 7 years or so. It could be slightly longer. We've done some public meetings. You've all been around. We've gone through this a couple of times trying to understand what archived and deleted was. I then went through and did some data investigation. Oh, I'm sorry about this. There's a couple of these that have ended up with all the fonts going a bit weird, probably because I resized them and did something weird. I've tried to enumerate all of the different statuses that you can have. So we've got status, and then we've got modification, and what does it mean on the street in various ways. There are some that are not a valid state in that they shouldn't be able to be in that state according to the schema. And null points to me for referring to read the schema, but I had to go through and reread it and just made sure that how many things were in these different states. And then we also discovered, using, thanks to Andrew's help, we went through and used the XML for doing some analysis, and we found a whole pile of stops that were set to the status archived in the system, which is why we're not using archive, because it actually exists from 2.2 onwards as a status within the system, even though some people's systems may not be able to represent the status. And we've also got a number of removed as in not migrated to the new NaPTAN. We're going to go and hunt those down. We knew there were some stops. We've managed to find a record of them, and we're just going through and assessing those. Meanwhile, we've done a little bit of tactical steps. We've removed, but unofficially, so we've removed but not put through a managed removal process. So there were some 5x stops that were due to a typo. We've just taken those out. They went. Oopsies, I don't believe need to be recorded. They are just oopsies. But that's something that I would like your feedback on as to whether we actually need to record oopsies or we just throw them away and go, oops, it was just a bit of data. Then we've also got the 900 ACTO code stops that were national coach stops that we confirmed that we didn't want and we just didn't put into publish. I believe that those need to go through the proper deletion process, and that's what I need to build. So what we recommended to do was work on a minimal service and present it to the ecosystem for discussion. What we are doing now. We need to include how the different status fields are being used. Have a look at that table of the different status fields and give me, I haven't done it down by ACTO code, but it is wild as to how many stops are in the different statuses. We don't have to solve the status modification things right now. We just need to give a service for getting stops out of the system. So it doesn't matter what you've got them stuck as. If you want to get rid of them, I want to give you a way of getting rid of them and not have it relying on me trying to figure out which status it should be, because trying to get you all to agree on the same status is going to be more effort than giving you the ability to just go and delete the ones you want to delete. That may sound like I'm doing it backwards, but I'd love your feedback on the way of doing that. We may come up with something a bit more stable in the future. We also need to address the removals of MPTG and stop areas. And yes, I see what's there and I see what's being written, and you should, if we read ahead slightly, I'll get to that in a minute. So we're going to address the removal of MPTG and stop areas, and the implementation needs to include documenting it so it makes a lot more sense. Investigation plan. We're speaking to you today. We're going to do some work with the bus operators, because we need to make sure that bus operators and consumers are also going to understand why suddenly their files are a little bit smaller. We're working with the BODS team, and we have a bit of a rollout, and we'll do a bit of a campaign as we start to roll this out. This is not going to be a really short, quick and easy fix, I'm afraid. So this is the high-level process that I've got planned, and it's written out like this so that we can understand what might be needed at each step, and then we've got a whole pile of questions that we're going to answer by doing a lot of user research, by coming and talking to you and really understanding. But what I want to understand is, do I have the right kind of high-level steps at the moment? So before I begin, are there any questions from what's flowed, apart from the question that basically I'm hopefully going to answer in the next couple of minutes? Cool. Right. So we have John. I've called it John Who Does It All, because I've just basing it on John made it nice and easy. Who's John Who Does It All for my LA, needing to revise. Just a second, I'm just going to hide cursors. Otherwise, if you follow me, I can't see what I'm reading. Needing to revise my NaPTAN data, I want to inform NaPTAN users that I am permanently removing stops from the data set so that I can clearly manage which ACTO codes and NaPTAN SMS codes cannot be reused. So it's very clear that these are codes that we're going to put into a box that we say don't use, can't ever use again. These are deader than dead, Jim, fired into the sun, not to be reused. Now, hopefully, that's what we want to do with it. So we want to take these, put them in a box and fire them into the sun. So to inform us, we need to do it somehow, and I've got a whole pile of questions. Do we do it as a form? Is it an XML form? Is it a CSV file? We believe the only two pieces of data we will need is the ACTO code and the NaPTAN code. We will hold some metadata as well as to who did it, what date, all of those things, but those are the only two pieces of data we believe that we will need. And then I've asked some questions around how do we do them in bulk. Mark, thinking of you, how much information do we need? Also thinking of Mark and everybody, do we need everything about that stop or just its ACTO code and NaPTAN code? And who should have these permissions? The next step, so that's the informed step. The next step is John Who Does It All for my local authority, needing to revise my NaPTAN data. I want to ensure none of the stops I will remove are used in active bus services, so that I am certain bus operators using my data have updated their routes. So this is like a check to make sure that there is nothing in BODS or there's nothing in Travel Line or TransExchange or anything like that that's using those same codes. So I've just put in check with BODS. We'll check with other things. We use the APTAN code, the ACTO code and the NaPTAN code, kind of like a quick, or the SMS code as a check. And we know the ACTO code is the primary one, but we also want to check for the NaPTAN code because we know there's a couple of people who might be reusing them, and we just want to make sure that we understand which one's important, and giving us feedback here is really good. Are all bus routes and BODS? Is there a stop? Who owns the notifications? Is this the purpose of the X years before removing step? Was that the original intent of it? Or have I just helped me understand that? And I think from conversations with Tim, this might be, and this might be a modern way of doing it by actively doing some checks. So you don't have to wait ages to get rid of it. We just need to go and make sure that nobody's still using it. So we can now do that, and we just want to make sure that that matches what people are thinking. So we've put a lot of stuff in there. And then assuming that we've got confirmation it's not being used anywhere. As John, who does it all for my local authority, needing to revise my NaPTAN dataset, I want to enter a stop into the managed removal list so that I can remove the stop from my dataset. So we're saying you put it into the box and then you can do what you want with it from your dataset, but we'll put it in the box to fire into the sun. So confirm, check, complete. Again, we still just need the ACTO code and the NaPTAN code, double checking. And a whole pile of little questions around confirmation. Can I see the list of stops that I've removed? If I now remove it from my data set, what's the problem? What happens if I don't remove it from my data set? And should I tell anyone about it? And then as John, who does it all, in this publish bit, as John, who does it all for my local authority, needing to publish my NaPTAN data, I want reassurance that my data set has only valid ACTO and NaPTAN codes so that I can ensure bus operators in my LA can plan their services. So this is our upload service. We'll then go and check our managed stops to make sure that you haven't accidentally reused a code that you told us was to be removed from the system. So it's again providing that check that these are dead, they're fired into the sun, you cannot reuse them, and we'll do a check to make sure that you haven't accidentally had a blip in your system or a typo or something to bring back a code. And we don't know what's going to happen. If you have one in your stop, we'll figure that out with some user testing. And then I've used Neil, who has depots, as an example of a consumer. So, as Neil, who has depots ensuring my bus routes are all valid, I want to be certain that NaPTAN data I used has no managed removal stops, so I can publish my services easily to BODs. So they need to download NaPTAN data, they want the full NaPTAN XML in whichever schema they want, and how can they confirm their data has no managed removal stops, and should they only be able to download active stops? Does that service, I know that was going through it quite quickly, but does that make sense to people? Is that simple enough? Are there any steps there that and Andy, I'll come to you in a second, are there any steps there that we should be putting in, or are there any steps that we should take away? Are we doing enough checking? And I know that the ACTO code is the primary one, but the NAP, as far as I understand, and unless you refer me to the schema, feel free to chip in. As far as I understand, the NaPTAN code or the SMS code should also not be reused because that is also a unique code. So we want to basically highlight that both codes get blasted into the sun, not just the ACTO code. So I saw a thumbs up from Andy. I see a smile from Tansy. I see Robin gave me a bit of a nod. Thank you for that. I really appreciate the feedback. Is there any red flags for anyone? So I'm just going to double check the time. Okay, so we've got about 45 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish running through this, and then I want to give you a good 10-15 minutes to read through all of the questions and put some answers and add extra questions. Tim, I saw your hand pop up.
Yeah, just a thought about getting rid of the removal of stops. There probably ought to be a cross-reference to some of the localities and areas, and if we're removing the last stop in an area, making sure that we're just tidying that up.
That's a really good point. Can we leave that in the next iteration of this, and the first iteration of this is just helping us get rid of some and clean out the data set, and then we can start cleaning out some of the localities? Or do you think that's important enough, or it's going to create issues that we should tackle it as part of this first run?
I think we need to have a bit more of a think about it, because I'm not sure you can end up with somewhere with no stops in it for some of the other types, and I don't want to cause nulls to appear and problems as a result. But that's a couple of hours deep thinking, I think.
I also think with this, Tim, my proposal is to do, and I'm calling it a disco alpha, So we will build a proof of concept and test this with people at the same time as uncovering some of these extra complications, because we can't tell some of these complications until we try and run it with the data. So this is what I'm proposing, is that we do some of that proof of concepting and discovery of where the edges are for the MVP in that first bit, and only we don't need to do this for a lot of time. Once we've got a proof of concept running, we just need to figure out, do we end up in that position, or is there a way of avoiding that, and can we flag that up? Is that a check that needs to happen? And we can start to flag up those, because then if we need to then plan, okay, if you're removing the last stop in a locality, you've also got to remove the locality. That gets us into removing stuff from MPTG. So just kind of playing around with those edges, we'll try to play around in the Disco Alpha. Does that sound a good approach to people? And like something you'd come and work with us on? I'm seeing a nod from Tansy, but Tansy has things that they want to get out of their data set. Mark Mark, I'm really keen to get a thumbs up or a nod from you, because I know that you have 7,000 plus stops. Perfect. That's what I love to hear. We might be going one by one for a bit. Mark, don't worry, we will not make you do 7,000 one by one. Bulk will be number 2 or 3 on the list of features that we need to bring in, or how we do it. So just doing a high-level summary, NaPTAN publishes a set of remove, don't use stops. Oh, Mark, you've put your hand up, and I'll let you talk
it
for
was
a sec.
just another thought. And if we're archiving some of these stops, I put a note on there, one of them things. Is there anything in any system somewhere, seen as the NaPTAN SMS code is an optional code, if it's never to be reused again? If a stop's been archived, could it be potential that NaPTAN code can be released to be used again? Because in Manchester, in the current format of 3 MAN characters followed by 5 subsequent characters, and the amount of stops that we've had over all the years, we're coming to the end of the limitation of our 5 characters after it. So, and then through reading some of the various data provider manager profiles from the NaPTAN schema that I'm not allowed to mention, there was a bit of ambiguity in what the actual format and that the SMS code had to be. Some were mentioning that it had to be 8 or 9 characters. Some just mentioned it had to be 5 characters. Didn't mention anything being subsequent after the 3 characters. And there were, anyway, so we ended up starting to just use MAN and then 2 letters after it, just to make it at least 5 characters. It doesn't seem to have broken any systems, but that's what we had to do.
So, really good point. I think there needs to be a discussion on the joy that is the NaPTAN SMS code, and just kind of sorting out how people are using it and what people are using it for, because I don't believe many people are still using T9 phones and the WAP service, but I know that it's being used in some cases as the QR code coding and things like that. So just really getting to grips with that, I think, would be one. And the second one is, I'm keen to hear from Tim, because Tim probably remembers what the rules were originally, and I'm not going to score you null points this time, because we do actually need that reference back to what was intended.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a number of different places that use different approaches with SMS, because places like London and Yorkshire use all numbers because they'd got pre-existing systems before the National Travel Line text service, which wanted to do something so you never had to press the same key on your handset together. So the rules about what's allowed are pretty non-existent compared to how they were, but there are some, so it's just worth working through that. Going back to the original, can we reuse numbers? I think we need to remember that there are some users of transport data that are looking at historic data going back 5, 10 or more years, some of the consultants and network planners and things like that. And so reusing numbers might cause some challenges for them, but we can probably have a chat to the sisters of this world and other people and Atkins that will be doing that and work out whether there's a way of overcoming it if it is a real problem for an area.
So that sounds really good. I'd like to propose that there's another one of these. Not that I want to run zillions of these, but I know that they work to tease out these problems. Of let's sit down and talk about the joy that is the joy of the NaPTAN SMS code, what it was originally designed for, why T9, which is the technical term for the texting on your 9 digits. Phone geek used to work for Nokia. How those were designed to work. Do we still need those rules now? Does this mean that we can be more flexible? What rules should exist for the NaPTAN codes? And can we reuse them? Oh, let's uncover it and figure that out. So that'll be another session that we run. But ACTO codes are fired into the sun and never to be reused. Is that correct? And Tim, I'm just going to call on you again because you are
they really
you're
should
the only
be.
person. You are the only
should
person
really
that I will
be
not go null poi.
Absolutely fired into the center of the universe, far away, so we can never reuse them. Yeah.
And so the ACTO codes will be the key one because everything's got an ACTO code. So we will make sure that those are never reused ever. The NaPTAN codes will have a bigger discussion on. So that's all there. What else did I need to do? Oh, we might do managed removal as just a tiny little set besides the main NaPTAN MPTG that just holds what codes are removed, and you could get a feed from that. You can drop things into it, and we'll figure out how that looks. So what this means is we wouldn't try and change the NaPTAN data set. We would give you a place to put the ones you're going to remove, and then you can remove them from your systems. And if you try to publish something that you've told us you're removed, we will flag it up to you. Does that make sense to everyone? I don't see any frowns or red flags. Andy's got his thumb up. Fantastic. So what I'm going to do, what I'd love you to do, is if you can take...
Jay, quickly just jumping in. Keith had his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Keith.
Yes. So when you do your managed removal, wherever it is, you're only going to record down the ACTO code and the NaPTAN code. Is that what you were saying, or are you going to keep the whole record? Because if it's removed from the system and you're just keeping that, how do then people reference in the future the historical data where the stop was?
This is an entire second problem that I now am working on called data retention policy. So I'm going to come back with a date with the data retention policy. I'm just in the process of sketching it out, and that is one of the things that we're trying to consider how that should work, Keith. What we want to do is ensure that we have some way of getting rid and sorting out the various stops. And I realized I forgot to go through one corner. So let me just run back ever so slightly, because this may be a worthwhile little piece to visit. And it's more planting a seed.
Go on,
Sorry,
then come back. I'd add more things, but say what you're going to say, then I'll come back.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just going to go through the types of stop statuses. So give me your other piece there, Keith.
My other query was, I was just generally more interested to understand of how the DFT new system works. When it validates, does it just, if new data is given to it, does it wipe away what it's got basically and replace it with what's given as gospel? Does it have a database now? Just to understand why it is the way that you are proposing to do certain things, and are your proposals linked to restrictions of what your system does as opposed to what suppliers does? Because it occurs to me, why can't we just add removed to the modification status, give it all the ownership and power to the authority so they can just have a stop, submit a status of removed, and the DFT removes it from what goes out to the public?
That is one way of doing it, and that was one of the ways that we considered. I've just tried to go through and create a really simplified version of that. So what we do is, because we wanted to be able to ingest any XML files, so we want to future-proof this for 2050. So I've we've been looking at a system that could take in NetX, a NetX UK, a NetX that covers spaceships, a NetX that covers teleportation or something like that. So we wanted to think of, if we wanted to future-proof this, how do we future-proof it? And one of the ways of doing that, and what we built, was something that ingests the data, validates it against the XML that we're told that it is using. So if you tell us this is 2.4 data, we get the 2.4 schema and we validate the data against that. And we then put the data into the local authority. We then we strip out the notes field. We then combine all of the data together into a national data set. And we do that dynamically every time we're given a file. One of the things we are looking at is how we continue to improve on this, how we build on this way of working, so that we can take in 2.5, for example, if people want to move to that, if systems allow it, if people's systems want to start producing a NetX file, how we would do that. So we want to think about how we do that. We can't do those now, so please don't give us a 2.5 file. It'll probably fail. But we want to look at how we build something that maintains for the future. We may very well start looking at putting in a database, but it will not be like the old SQL database. It will be a new style database that allows a lot more flexible data management and a lot more flexible migration of data. So one of the visions that we are looking at for 2050 or towards 2050, for example, is somebody giving us a piece of data in 2.1. We put it through our system and somebody says, I need that in NetX. And we go, right, we can build you a valid NetX file with the data that we've been provided, and looking at how we would do something like that. So we want to future-proof the system and make it as compatible as possible. So that's kind of the mindset we've built it on. I'm not allowed to talk about Crocodilia evolution. Please just go look at it because it's really fascinating. But there is a notion around evolving towards stability, and that's one of the principles that we're looking at for our long-term vision for NaPTAN. Haraj and Hannah, did I manage to explain that relatively clearly? I know I did mention crocodiles.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, the crocodile reference is good. You should definitely, if you're not aware of crocodile evolution, please Google it.
So you don't have a database, you get from the authority, you strip out what you don't want, so you don't really have a history of changes. So in theory, if an authority just deleted a lot of records, you would take that to be true and give it out.
Technically, yes, but we are at the moment keeping every single file that we are given and every single file that we produce. So should somebody wipe out the entirety of their system and give us a file that contains nothing, we can go back and restore it to its known state. We are looking at how we manage that removal in a way that is controlled and so much better, so that if for example, Mark wants to remove 7,000 of his stops or 17,000 of his stops. Mark, I'm losing count, and they seem to grow every time we talk in number. We want to make sure that is a managed process and is very carefully controlled.
Sure, it just strikes me that the ownership is with the local authority, and the local authority system, if it sets it as archive and sends it to you, you just don't send that out to the public. Therefore, the public or the users don't get a full list of archived stops, but the authority can manage that. It's got its history in its system. Archived is within the XML, so it just means it could happen a lot sooner rather than suppliers reacting to the way the DOT potentially wants to do it.
So, Keith, that is really good, and I just explained why we can't do that. When you're not driving, have a look through and let's discuss it. I'm more than happy to sit down and have a longer discussion about this. At the moment, we're proposing a way forward to do it that we believe will work for every single local authority. It gives them control over what they manage and what they remove, and it allows people to work across many, many different systems. Some people's systems will not allow them to have archived. There are some people who may not want to use archived for this. We know that there is one one local authority who's used archived, and we've never removed the stops, so they're still being published at the moment. So we want to make sure that we are on top of this and we are controlling this as much as we can. Also building something that will work for MPTG, that will work for stop areas, and that will work in the future. And that's what we're trying to do. And we're also trying to build something that will double check with BODs that nothing that a local authority is trying to remove is currently being used by a bus operator. Because if they are, we will flag it as, we know you'd love to remove it, but Simone is still using this, is still reporting, Simone who has a bus. Simone who has a bus is reporting that they still have a route using this stop. You might go and want to have a chat with them and ensure that they update their records, and then you can remove this. So that's some of the looping that we're trying to do to make sure that we don't have a mismatch between ourselves and BODs. Hopefully that makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep, no worries. So just to run back around to the sidebar, the type of stop statuses. Now, I tried to describe this to somebody because I went through the stop statuses and it just went a little bit mad trying to describe what was physically on the street. So I broke it down into 4. I'd love your feedback and then we can look at this later on. So there are 4 types of statuses that a stop can physically be in. So the first one is awaiting planning approval. So these are stops which a bus operator could start to plan into their routes. They are not yet available and may not exist on the street. The location of the stop is not confirmed and may vary by several hundred metres along the road because you've got to do all the traffic surveys and things like this. And this is a stop that does not yet have a physical address on the street. So it may be a data stop, a stop within NaPTAN, but it's not a stop within the world. And when I did those interesting little side blue pieces down below of what things NaPTAN does, this is the proposal and planning stage. Then there's available. This is what most bus stops that are in use will be. These are stops which exist on the street and can be used to plan routes. The stop type should indicate the street furniture available and how the passengers are expected to catch the bus, hail and ride, flex, custom, etc. The location of the stop can vary over time by about, and I got this wrong and Tim will correct me, I think it's about 10 metres, but I've said 100 to 200 metres, depending on the LA. And if it moves more than that, it will be made and not used and a new stop created. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is this stop is physically there on the street and it has street furniture and all of those things. This is a physical stop, an available stop to use. Then there's a not used stop. So these are stops which have either moved beyond the tolerance of the local authority or they've had an issue such as traffic management. The street furniture might not be present or maintained. These stops are not used in any bus routes. However, they can be used if the bus operators check with the LAs for the reasons for closure. Now, there's a couple of these that I've uncovered in Croydon, which are now on the wrong side of some of the local traffic calming measures that came in during COVID and things like that. So it's kind of like a really interesting thing of what does this not used mean? So this is kind of like the stop's there, but nobody's stopping at it. How do we indicate that? Does it have like no flags on it? What are the things that we could indicate to a bus operator? Hey, if you wanted to run a new thing through here, you could, or not. And then the last ones are the remove stops. So these are stops which have been moved or closed down and all street furniture has been removed. These may not be safe to use or are no longer possible to use. So these are ones where a change to the road has meant it's no longer safe to stop there. These stops should not be used in any bus routes and cannot be made available. They should be removed from the NaPTAN dataset. And just to confirm, the stop has had all its markings and street furniture removed and it is physically not there. So this is a data, again, we've gone through that birth from a data only set. It's then become available and physically there. Then it's physically there, but maybe shouldn't removed. And now it's a data only set again, and we should remove it from the system. Do these four stages or types of stop status make sense to people? I'm not proposing changing anything. I just want to make sure that my describing the stops this way makes sense and makes sense in terms of how users, local authorities and bus operators and people in this ecosystem think about stops, because that remove section is the one that we're looking at, but I want to make sure that I've got the other three right as well. So I'm going to just check the time. I'm going to give you 5 minutes just to go through those stop statuses and have a good close read and a think about them. Have a look down at the questions that I've asked, have a look over at the service that's proposed, and give us your feedback on it. Your open and honest feedback, answer the questions, tell me if I've got it wrong, tell me if I'm going completely mad and I'm over focusing on the evolution of crocodiles, and other fun things that fill my life with joy. So I'm going to set this up for a 5 minute.
5 minutes later.
Okay, so we've got just under 2 minutes left. I see there's an essay going on about the not used stops. I will definitely be reading through that and going through that. And I'm just checking if there's any. Oh, there's a couple of good questions. Excellent. I will run through those when we come through. But I will focus on that question about or the essay. So the essay writer, let's get ready to be asked interesting questions. I also see there's a conversation between Mark and Tim around timing, and I'd really like to dive into that as well if we've got enough time. So we've got 2 seconds left. So that is the lovely sound of the airplane to tell us to come back. So let's have a look at the essay. Could the essay writer put their hand up if that's fine for them, just so that I know and I know who I'm talking to. But essentially it says, to mark a stop inactive, we currently use this to mark a stop physically there but currently closed, to prevent journey planning systems from providing results even if the stop is used in a schedule. Ideally, we want to use the stop availability, but we found some journey planners not using this functionality, mainly to close a stop due to roadworks. So, Mark, is this from you, I take it?
It is, yeah.
So this not used is kind of temporarily not used. So
yeah, so
it's not.
Yes. So
cool.
That's in NaPTAN where we mark it inactive in NaPTAN, which means it can be there, but it can be it's not fully deleted in our system, or to say it's been removed totally. But we just use it every now and then to close a stop for maybe a week or 2 and then mark it back active again. It saves a lot of work of having to readjust a lot of schedules.
That makes a ton of sense. And it says if a stop is inactive in NaPTAN, many but not all scheduling systems will not see these to be used. And I think that is one of the questions that I asked under I think it's Neil, who has depots, and a couple of other people, of should I only see available stops, or should I only see active stops and not the inactive stops and other ones? Gerard, I see you've got your hand up.
Right. Well, on the last point, also sort of understand the logic in a deregulated environment to a certain extent. That is, from a TfL perspective, completely, and I'm not criticising whether it's feasible elsewhere, but from a TfL perspective, it's completely unworkable. Because if we start suspending stops that are closed for a couple of weeks, we get notifications every day of the week for temporary stop closures. We have a content management system that's aligned with a countdown system that deals with that. So, I'm going to respect other people's choices, and I'm not trying to criticise what works elsewhere. It's not for me to say. But certainly the scale of bus stop closures and associated roadworks and diversions as well, it would not be feasible, and I certainly wouldn't support it changing NaPTAN. There are other mechanisms to highlight when a stop is closed. Now, obviously, if a stop is out of action for 6 months, that's a different kettle of fish entirely. These sort of 1 and 2 week closures are dealt with through a content management system. They are available in data flows. They're generally covered by some form of messaging. So just from my perspective of what it's worth, I don't believe that it's feasible for NaPTAN to be able to deal with it, certainly from a London perspective, because there are other means of doing that a lot more dynamically, particularly if you're in a situation, and I know this is probably beyond the scope of our conversation today. If you had a situation that NaPTAN uploads became a bit more similar to something like OpenStreetMap, i.e. you do the edit and it's instantly available, then there might be a bit more we could do with it. But even then, if you're having to go through the performance of it, has to, I know the upload cycle is a lot faster, but you're still having to sort of create a data set, upload it, it needs to be validated, and it doesn't appear instantly. Then it's not, it needs to be more dynamic if that was to be a sort of a viable option.
So Jared, just to unpack what you said, that sounds really good. And I think there is two types of not used stop that we could talk about here. One is it's down for a couple of days because somebody's digging up the road right outside that bus stop, and the one is it's down for a couple of weeks or months, a la Moorgate Station, Moorgate bus stop outside Moorgate Station that was down for quite a long time due to the Elizabeth line work going through. I live in London, so I'm trying to think of London examples. So those two are quite different scales, and it could be interesting to interrogate how those go. And I think there's an entire workshop around how these work. The other one is I'm really interested in your need for more real-timer style information, and I think there's something around having an ingestion API that means that you can make the changes in your system and they're automatically fired to us and we fire them out, bash, bash, bosh. That I know 2 minutes is such a difference from the overnight previously, and I kind of want to get things even faster. 30 seconds is a long time data-wise, especially, well, it can feel a long time data-wise, and especially if you're wanting to pump that information to downstream systems. And that's one of the things where I think we might need to look at an ingestion API. How do we have an API that, for example, Jared, you can build into your system that will just take your data and just fire it through to us in the right format, and we just ingest it and move on. But also, so we don't have to take all of your data every time. We only need to take the changes. And that is where we need to start thinking, because if we only took the changes, that would be microseconds. And if we only had to feed out the changes, that would be microseconds. And how do we do that? And at the moment, that's a big question of how the system works. But I'm thinking that might sound an interesting goal to you, at least, Jared, if not anyone else on the call. You can just give me a thumbs up, Jared, if I've tempted you with the idea of some really fun and exciting APIs. Excellent. So I think there's a really cool piece to dig down into there around what is this type of an active stop, or the temporarily out stops. The permanently out stops, when a stop is removed and may not be put back, absolutely. It is not coming back. It is never going. It is never going to be there again. How about a remove stop that has been replaced by a new stop? Yeah, so if you've moved the stop too far, or I believe if it's moved across a boundary or into another locale or something, there might be something of you've deleted one stop and you want to put another one in. That's also the same thing. If you've moved it far enough that it needs a new code, because it's going to affect people's routings and mapping systems. Andy, I saw your hand go up and go back down. Yeah. Do you have a question?
That one was for me. It's not so much a question. That's more about the Christchurch scenario. The stop is physically there, but it's got to change from one ATCO area to another.
Yeah, and that's also what I was thinking about. Of one of them is removed, the other one, and it's kind of reborn. I know that it because it's going to get a new Cody bar thing and a new this, so it's going to be a new stop, even if it's the same old stop. It'll get a new flag. So maybe it becomes the flag number becomes the new of when it gets a new flag number, it's no longer the same stop. But I think that's a really good question that bears looking into. Let me just scroll around. Should all removed ACTO codes be put on an archive list to present as being used again. That is my idea. So apart from the oopsies, because the oopsies were just oopsies, they shouldn't have even appeared, and we can reuse them. Everything else, if it was deleted, we want to remove it. So those 900 coach stops, they will be put on the list and fired into the sun. The several thousand stops that Andrew helped me find that had been removed from the system because NaPTAN only gets bigger, and then we found that data set of the ones that weren't there. We're going to also put them on the list to be fired into the sun once we've checked them all with you. So don't worry, we're not going to remove anything without double checking. Because I wouldn't do that, because I fear for my life, but that makes you all sound scary. I fear for my sanity. Here we go. Coming up here, as ACTO code is the only mandatory code in the SMS code is optional and limited to a live SMS request, could NaPTAN codes be released from archive stops? I think that's an entire discussion that we're going to have and sit down and really look at NaPTAN/SMS codes, how they're used, and do we want the ability to pull them back? And if we pull them back, what sort of problems could we have, and how would we prevent those problems? Do I receive confirmation? Yes, confirmed it is removed, so I can remove it from my system and ACTO log. Yes, that's perfect. We want to make sure that we confirm with you what we've removed, and you can easily see what you've fired into the sun. So if you end up with anything being put through, you can do it. One of the interesting questions that nobody seems to have raised is what happens if you oopsie a removal? If you typo or something, or if you accidentally remove a stop. Now, it shouldn't happen because of the check with BODs. If it's being used in a live system, that should pick up any oopsies. So that's what I'm kind of hoping the system works out, but we'll see how it goes. And plan routes, those seem to be all of the points, unless somebody can spot any other. Oh, must have bulk changes to cover areas of splitting out from the main ally. Yep, we know bulk changes are needed. I just want to make them like feature 3 or 4, maybe feature 2 if I'm really pushed, rather than feature 1. Mark, if people are not using the correct ACTO codes in their schedules and BODs, we have a much bigger data problem than removing data from NaPTAN. And that is a really, really interesting point that hopefully us and BODs can kind of work together with bus operators to make sure they're using them right.
We have some certain operators for about 7 years. We've been feeding back to correct their stops and their data, and still haven't.
Then let's get together with you, us, and BODs to talk to those and figure out how we can make their life easier. Is it that they don't know how to download the right data? Is it they can't update it in their system? Let's figure out, because I don't believe they're just being obstinate for obstinate's sake. There's possibly something there that we would like to uncover and see if we can fix. Does that sound a good thing?
We've been making some progress recently, and especially us going into the franchising world coming up soon, we'll have a bit more control on making sure they're going to be using their correct stops. So that may be irrelevant from our stance, but whether it's happened in other areas and stuff.
I think it would still be worthwhile just having a chat with them to make sure that they're able to download the right data, because it could be that they've never been to one of these and they're still using data from 10 years ago, and that could be part of this. So I just it'd be nice just to check in with them from our point of view, just to make sure that they are downloading data. Tansy, you've got your hand up very patiently.
I have a scenario that I wanted to just mention that happened to us at the end, sort of last year, which is around kind of stops were basically deleted from our database unintentionally due to a system error. So when we transferred our database from our old server from PTI to the TFW one, there was an issue with the software where certain chunks of the database were just removed, except they weren't removed because I wasn't able to reuse the same codes but they weren't in the database. So when we re-uploaded the XML to NaPTAN, these stops disappeared. Thankfully, it wasn't a huge number of them, and we were able to track them down and reinstate them, but they disappeared anyway. And of course, the validation said, yeah, everything's fine. Didn't, you know, yeah, there were maybe 20 fewer stops than there had been previously, but there was no kind of strong indication that something had gone terribly wrong until I started getting feedback from operators going, what the hell's going on here? So that's the sort of thing I'm just wondering, is there going to be more contingency? Because again, relying on BODs may not be the best. Like, again, not a lot of the Welsh data is in BODs. And I think the same situation for Scotland, where you're not going to be able to rely on BODs for that. So I just wondered if that was something that you had considered could happen, because it happened to us.
So there's several points in there that I'd like to unpack. Firstly, on your data integrity and things like that, one of the things Haraj, me and Hannah have been knocking around in this evolution towards stability notion is the idea of being able to give you a view of the data stats or the data integrity of what you've just uploaded. So this is your completeness, this is your accuracy, this is your consistency within your fields. You gave us 20 less stops than last time, or this was the number of stops you gave, and just being able to give you some of that information whenever you upload data. So we kind of want to investigate that. That's something we're knocking around.
Granted, a lot of this is making up for, you know, flaws with the system that we use. Granted,
yeah,
but also I keep getting told I can't afford a new one, so I have to put up with it. So
oh, absolutely, and that is one of the things that I'm really, really aware of. Ain't nobody getting rich on the back of NaPTAN, and even though it basically runs the entirety of the bus system and public transport, this is partly why I wanted to build out what it enables, because that enables people to look at how important it is and why it might need a little bit of money in places. I think, Tansy, there's some really interesting points in there also around data integrity and how we help you build that data integrity, and let's have a chat about that. Once we've got this kind of started up, we'll use you as one of our Disco Alpha people, of course, and kind of figure out what would happen in that scenario, and can we flag it to you in a way that makes sense. But also, if it's not BODs, what would it be to test our schedules against? So if we needed to use a travel line feed or a TransExchange feed, how do we get that feed in for Wales so that we can provide a check for Wales as well as a check for the rest of the for England with BODs and Scotland with whatever Scotland uses? Does that make sense? I see you smile. Life is good. Ian.
Yeah, just picking up on a couple of things. Yeah, from our perspective, what Mark was saying about operators using correct NaPTANs, yeah, from our perspective, they're not downloading NaPTAN on a frequent basis, so quite often they are incorrect in the stops they're using. But we found out probably a little bit more than that, in that they seem to have 3 data sets, some operators, and the registration, what they put into BODs, and then what they use for publicity. And it's sort of delving down in how they're compiling that, because when we've used ABODs to do corridor analysis, we've found that the stops that should be in aren't in the system in ABODs. And obviously, we let the operators know, but I think it's a wider problem than's probably been stated here.
And I think you've brought up a really good point, which is why I created the persona of Simone has a bus, because I'm trying to capture not I think now my hypothesis, and I'm more than happy to be wrong, is the big players are generally better at downloading data and using data. It's the smaller players in the bus operators who are struggling to keep up with the data. And one of my things is, let's go and find out how we can help them get better NaPTAN data. And let's just have, Coverway one of the biggest operators in the country. My theory is proven completely wrong, and we just need to assume that no bus operator is using NaPTAN in any way, shape or form properly, and we go and we start talking with them and doing a lot more, giving them a lot more love. We've given a lot of love to the local authorities as part of the replatforming because we had to. Now let's go and give a lot more love to the bus operators and see if we can figure out making their lives easier. What's a better way of getting the data? What's a better way of making sure you get the most accurate and up-to-date data? Is there ways of making sure there's a problem with the CSV files? I won't go into it because we've only got 2 minutes. Does that make sense?
Your hypothesis, I'd say, of the big 5, of the 2 that operate in our area, they don't do NaPTAN downloads to update their registrations, either for EBSR, BODs, or anything else.
Right. So Ian, let's set up a conversation and let's get in and understand why they don't. Because are we not giving it to them in a way that's edible for them? I want to make NaPTAN a nom 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 lovely thing for the data consumers. I don't want to make them fight for it. So let's have a look at what we might need to put on our backlog to make it much nicer for them and much more usable, etc. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, we'll end up talking to a couple of the big bus operators and going, why do the thing? So I'm going to spin all the way across because you've all seen this before. I'd really like your feedback today. Just on what gave you joy, what was good and useful, what frustrated you, what was not good and useful, and what made you sad, what things are missing, what things should be happening. And also just up on the top right is the contact details for us. So I've got Haraj and Hannah's email address because they're the product owners currently for NaPTAN. There's me as the service designer, and then there's the central contact email. So you're welcome to use all or any of those to contact us. So I'm going to stop sharing and thank you all. We've run 2 minutes over. So thank you all for your patience and your energy and your efforts today. I really appreciate your feedback. Give me feedback on how this is run and what we're missing. As you guessed, there was a large list, which I think Hannah and Haraj were keeping of things that I promised to talk about in the future. I'm going to try to run these every couple of weeks, just so that we get through a lot of the stuff that we need to get through. I know there's bank holidays coming up, and I know there's stuff coming up, so aiming for every 2 weeks means probably about once every 3 weeks to a month. But aiming for every 2 weeks is kind of where we're going. So thank you all. I really appreciate it. And I am now going to stop recording as well. Record and transcribe. Stop recording.